Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of Bach's chorale harmonizations. I'm still feeling very under the weather, so I decided to try and conjure up the energy to put this video together, and I was able to get through this chorale. It was relatively complex, especially towards the end of the second system, but all in all, it's more or less functionally harmonic. Lots of activity in terms of modulation in the first system, and then we get some interesting modulations in the second system as well. But regardless, it's a fairly straightforward analysis, just lots of modulations the way that I look at it. We're just going to hop right into the analysis. This is Jesu Leiden, pain, und Tod, which translates to Jesus' suffering, pain, and death. I can only imagine that the lyrical content of this particular chorale is, or this text rather, is very grim, and I think that that is reflected in some of the pitch choices and some of the key areas that we see here. Namely, let's see, where is it? This C natural right here and this G natural right here. So we have three sharps in the key signature. We start on F sharp minor and we end on A major. Now I think the overall tonality of this chorale is A major, but I'm pretty convinced that we start in the key of F sharp minor. We then go to E sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and B, which is C sharp 7 over E sharp. That's 5-6-5. 5-6-5 chords kind of play kind of an important role. You do see them pop up quite frequently in this chorale. Maybe that's a coincidence, I don't know, but when I see something happen with some frequency over the course of the same chorale, it does tend to seem significant in some way. We then get F sharp minor, F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A, which is our tonic triad again, and also where I think we move back to the key of A major. It's now our 6th chord. We then have G sharp, B, E, and B, which is E major in first inversion. That's 5-6. And then we get A major, A, E, and C sharp. That's our tonic triad. And the theme of modulation going on here, I think this is where we move to the key of D major. This is our 5 chord. And the reason why we're moving to the key of D major is to explain why we end the chorale on an A7 chord, not on an A major chord. So this is a half cadence. We have a D major chord after this 5 chord as well. F sharp, A, F sharp, and D. Our tonic triad in first inversion. And then we have C sharp, A, G, natural, and E, another 5-6-5 chord. This is not the only 5-6-5 chord we're going to see as a cadence. It's a very unusual chord to cadence on, not because there's anything wrong with it theoretically, but more so because it's just not something that Bach does very often, so it sticks out, has its own unique profile. Okay, looking ahead, we probably have the most normative phrase in the whole chorale. It's all in the key of A major. We do get a resolution of 5 going to 1 first, though. We have D, D, F sharp, and F sharp. 2 roots and 2/3, kind of an interesting spelling, but we do immediately go back to the key of A major. This D major chord's now our 4. We then get E, C sharp, G sharp, and E. A bit of a deceptive progression of sorts. We would expect 5 here because we have the E and the G sharp, but instead of B we get C sharp, and that's a 3-6 chord. And if you've watched any of my videos in the past where we've seen a pattern like this, you could expect what's going to be on the other side of this 3-6 chord. F sharp, C sharp, A, and D. If you guessed a 4-6 chord, or I guess a 4-6-5, doesn't really make a difference. This pattern of taking a chord, going a diatonic step below and inverting it, and then going to a first inversion version of the first chord in the progression is a pattern that Bach uses particularly with 1 and 7 chords, but here we're seeing it with 4 and 3. We've seen it with 3 and 2. It's just a pattern that Bach uses to traverse like a series of stepwise chords, which is pretty cool. And then after our 4 chord we have G sharp and B going on as well, which is like a passing 7 chord. Bach often subdivides 4 and 7 over the course of a beat. It might even be the most common subdivided progression, where we see the progression occur over 2/8 notes. And then we get A major, A, C sharp, E, and C sharp, which is our tonic triad and root position. This D is a non-chord tone, this A is a chord tone, this B is an anticipation, and then we get E, E, A, and B. This A is a 4/3 suspension over the bass, so this is implying an E major chord, which is 5. Then we have G sharp and D happening at the same time during the resolution of the suspension, so this would what I would call a 5/7 chord. And then we have an anticipation going on here in the tenor before we get A, C sharp, E, and A, which is our tonic triad and root position. Okay, looking ahead, we have a half cadence, another half cadence, but this time it's in the key of F sharp minor. I think we stay in the key of A major for at least a while, though. Yeah, I think we stay in the key of A major up until at least the end of the first measure. Again, Bach presents another one of these modulation zones where any of these points could be where we move to the next key, but I hear this A right here, right before the E natural, is the point in which I decide to modulate, or I decide to mark the modulation. We get A, E, A, and C sharp. No need to reanalyze. That's another A major chord. Then we have G sharp, E, B, and E, which is E major over G sharp, which is a 5/6 chord. And then we get F sharp, A, and D. Another bit of a deceptive progression where we get 4/6. That's the D major, and this sort of starts the modulation, or the modulation zone, where you could analyze this as 6/6 in the key of F sharp minor, but I don't quite hear it this way. When we have a 4/6 chord and we go to a tonic triad via this ascending motion here, we typically have this, more specifically, 4/6 going to our tonic. We always have this leading tone connecting the bass. We have G sharp going to A, and then E, A, and C sharp, which is our tonic triad. Sometimes we even get another voice moving to turn this into a fully voiced 7th chord, like we do in a case like this. We only need 2 voices to move in order to do that in most cases, but here we have Bach moving 3 voices. But this is a slimmer version of that same progression. I do think, however, this is where we go to F sharp minor. A is now our 3 chord. Then we have E sharp, D, G sharp, and B, which is E sharp diminished, fully diminished 7th, which is a 7 chord. And then we have F sharp, A, F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A, which is our tonic triad. And then we cadence on C sharp major, C sharp, E sharp, and G sharp, which is our 5 chord. Definitely some similarities between the first phrase and the second phrase here in terms of how they end, where we have a dominant chord, a tonic chord, and then another dominant chord here. And I'm talking about their function, not so much their role, because a 7 is not a 5 chord, even though they function pretty much identically. And looking ahead, we have another phrase that ends in a half cadence in the key of F sharp minor, but in this case we have a move back to the key of A major first. At least that's how I hear it. We go from C sharp to F sharp. We've had this theme of a 5 chord going to a 1 chord in the next measure, or in the next phrase rather. So this F sharp minor chord, F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A is our tonic, but also in the key of A major it's our 6 chord. And then we get this progression that we saw in the first phrase, G sharp, B, E, and B, which is 5/6, E major over G sharp, A, E, and C sharp, which is our tonic triad and root position, A major. And then we have a passing tone here before we get some chromaticism. Now I think this A major chord is where we start the idea of being able to move back to F sharp minor. We could, but I don't think there's anything inherently about the next 2 beats that says F sharp minor over A major. So I'm going to analyze it in A major. We have A sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and C sharp, which is F sharp major over A sharp, and that's a secondary dominant. That's 5/6 of 2, because F sharp is the dominant of B and B is our 2. This D is a non-chord tone, this E is a 7th, but in this case still a non-chord tone. And then we have B, C sharp, F sharp, and D. So I think this C sharp is a 9/8 suspension over the bass, still implying our 2 chord here, but I do think this is where we modulate to the key of F sharp minor, it is now our 4 chord. And I think that because there's counterpoint going on, it's difficult to know exactly what chord is being applied on the next beat. This A is a 7th, but then we get B, B, G sharp, and D. So I do think by the time we get the resolution, the context of the chord has changed. It is now a 2-6 chord because we have G sharp and B, B and D. It's a very common pre-dominant chord, especially because this is a half cadence. 2 going to 5 is relatively common. It has like a half cadential formula, or a configuration that we see of chords moving from one to the next in a half cadence. But I think there's an argument to be made here that this F sharp and this A is just turning this 4 chord into a 7 chord as well, if you look at this G sharp as an accented non-chord tone. But I think all in all, the difference between 4 and 2-6 is so slight that it doesn't really matter. I just hear this as a diminished chord going to a 5 chord. So this A is a non-chord tone, this F sharp is a non-chord tone as well, and then we get E sharp, B, G sharp, and C sharp, which is another 5-6-5 chord, C sharp 7 over E sharp. I told you we would see another cadence that ends with another one of these 5-6-5 chords, which is interesting. But in this case, I feel like it's less of an overall impact, just because of the fact that the chord is diatonic to the key of F sharp minor. Here we're expecting A major, and instead we get this weird sort of otherwise plagal cadence that ends on a dominant that then forces the perspective to D major, which is a little bit more sudden. Okay, looking ahead, we have an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of A major, and I think we pretty much start in the, not exactly. The majority of the phrases in the key of A major, we do go from our 5 chord to 1, F sharp, A, F sharp, and C sharp, which is our tonic triad, F sharp minor, neighbor tone in the melody, passing tone in the bass, and then we have A, C sharp, F sharp, and C sharp, which is another F sharp minor chord, this time in first inversion. We have some passing tones going on in the outer voices. I do think this is where we go to the key of A major, though. This is now our 6th chord. Bach has gone to A major most of the time through 6, so I feel like there might be some continuity or some type of significance there. He does go to A major through 4 here, but then again, only when he's going in between A and F sharp, he does so through the F sharp minor chord. It seems to be the conduit that introduces either direction. But afterwards we get C sharp, G sharp, C sharp, and E. Another one of these sort of deceptive progressions. I feel like this is ultimately being used as a substitution for A because C sharp and E are present, but we get G sharp rather than A. So 3 versus 1, they're very similar chords. It's also a transitive progression. That's what I've been calling a transitive progression. We have 3 going to 6 in most cases. At least that's what the book will tell you, but C sharp going to E, 6 going to E. I did the same thing, but in reverse, 6 going to 3. That goes against the cycle of falling fifths, which is actually pretty typical of not just, if anything, not just tonal music, but music of the Baroque period. But regardless, 6 going to 3, I feel like Bach does it just as much as he does cycle of falling fifths progressions, so I don't know exactly how normative that rule is. So afterwards we have F sharp, A, and D. It's D major over F sharp, so 4-6. 3 going to 4 is pretty common. We have G sharp and B here. That spells out a G sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord. We're getting another subdivided 4-7 progression. In this case it's half diminished, but this is a very common subdivided progression that Bach does. But when you have 4-6 going to 1, it's a very common progression. And then we get A, E, A, and C sharp, which is our tonic triad, A major. And then we get E, E, G sharp, and B, which is our 5 chord, E major. And then we get A major again, A, E, A, and C sharp. Very similar to what's going on in the first phrase here in terms of just the profile. Like, look at what's going on in the bass. We have this big open 5th descending here, which is not an open 5th here. It's like here we have a 6th and then a 3rd, but still we're scaffolding the octave by breaking it up into larger chunks. Okay, moving ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of E. Not E minor, not E major, but E. We have some pretty strong instances of mode mixture going on here. And all in all, very fascinating phrase. Actually, moving forward, the middle section of the second system is probably the most interesting part of the chorale. So this A chord is going to be our gateway to the key of E major. It is our 4 chord. And then we get A, D sharp, F sharp, and B, which is B7 over A. That's 5-4-2. 4-2 chords play a role in this measure. It's kind of interesting. B7 over A wants to resolve to 1-6 more specifically, because the chordal 7th does tend to resolve down by step in most cases. We have G sharp, E, E, and B, which is our tonic triad. Sorry, I'll put E versus E there because there's some heavy borrowing from both of the keys here. We get some descending chromaticism here in the bass, and we know that there's going to be interesting chord progressions afoot if there is any type of stepwise chromatic motion that continues in the same direction. So after our 1-6 chord, we get G natural, E, A, and C sharp, another A7 chord, but in this case it's not functioning as a secondary dominant, it's functioning as a harmonization of melodic minor. Here we have C sharp, D sharp, E in the melody, which is either melodic minor or major, but because of this G natural, I'm inclined to believe it's melodic minor. And if we do look at it that way, it's 4-4-2 A7 over G. This F sharp is a passing tone, this D sharp is a passing tone. Now here it does sound like another subdivided 4-7 progression. I mean, we do have the 7 chord and the upper 3 voices, but over this G, it's not something that I'm going to mark on the page, but it's definitely something that we hear. So do keep that in mind. The 7th does resolve down by step to F sharp, but actually this F sharp is an accented non-chord tone. We have E, G, B, and E, which is our minor tonic triad, so very fascinating progression. 5 going to major tonic, 4 going to minor tonic. I guess technically also it's like a 4-7-ish chord, but with this G in the bass, it does undermine the analysis a little bit. If the chord's not entirely intact, or if there's not enough of a justifiable reason, then I will not mark it on the page, but it is something that if I were writing an article or if I'm making a video like I am in this case, I'll spend time talking about it. Alright, so after this chord we have A sharp, F sharp, A sharp, and E, or sorry, C sharp and E. This is an F sharp 7 chord over A sharp, another 5-6-5 chord. In this case it's 5-6-5 of 5 because F sharp 7 is, or just F sharp in general, is the dominant of B, and B is our 5 in this case. We actually saw another 5-6 chord of B here, but in this case it was in the context of A major rather than E major. So we're expecting a B major chord after this, not a B minor chord. B, 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 and D sharp, 3 roots and 1/3, but still a B major chord with a passing 7th in the alto, and then we cadence on E major, E, B, G sharp, and E. So we don't know if we're in E major or E minor yet. I feel like more people would lean towards the side of E major, and then we're just borrowing from E minor. But this next phrase might, well, it actually does offer some balancing evidence to suggest that we're in E minor equally as we are in E major. Or, as I like to say, we're in the key of E. We're just borrowing chords from both pitch collections, altering the G to G sharp or G natural as we see fit. So here we have C sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and E. That's C sharp minor, which is our 6th chord in the key of E major. And then we have F sharp, C sharp, A, and C sharp, which is our 2 chord, F sharp minor in the key of E major. So we have E major going on immediately afterwards. It's a normative progression, 6 going to 2. But afterwards we get a very interesting chord. It hits like a ton of bricks. It's a D, C natural, A, and F sharp. Now in the key of E major, this would be like a 7 chord, like a flat 7, like this would be E mixolydian. But the only way that I really can justify this chord and continue the tonal narrative is if this were tonicizing a chord in minor rather than major, because D is the dominant to G, and G belongs in the minor. In E minor, it's the median. So I do see this as 5-7 of 3. And we have this motion of ascending a 4th, and he's just doing it by stepwise motion. So we have C sharp going to D, F sharp, and then D going to G. So these are just the fifths in the bass. He goes from diatonic to not necessarily chromatic, but like I said, the parallel minor here, which is very interesting. It's a very unusual sound for a chorale. It sounds very angular, just drops off very quickly. But after our 5-7 chord, we do get a 3 chord. We get G major, G, B, G, and F sharp. I guess more specifically, G major 7. And then we have this A sharp as a neighbor tone here, and this E as a delayed passing tone. And I do think this 3 chord is actually where we go to the key of B minor. I forgot to talk about the cadence. Apologies. This is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B minor. So ultimately, I feel like Bach, in order to smooth the transition between E and B, he chooses E minor because E minor is adjacent to B minor on the cycle or the circle of fifths. I say cycle of falling fifths and circle of fifths a lot, so they get confused. But long story short, E major and B minor, even though they share just as many chords with one another than E minor and B minor, E minor and B minor are adjacent to one another on the circle of fifths, so the progression that would smooth between them would involve diatonic chords that are used more frequently. At least that's the way that I look at it, because E minor and B minor have, let's see, what do they have in common? They have E minor in common between the two of them, and they also have G major in common between the two of them. However, E major and B minor have, what would it be? Melodic minor chords between them, like E major is also common to B minor if you make the chromatic alteration. You also have A major, I suppose, which is also a chord that could belong to E minor. So really E and B have a lot of chords in common with one another, but he chooses to go through E minor as a vessel, or as a vehicle rather, to go to B minor, which is interesting. But regardless, this turns into 6-7, and then we get E, B, G, and D, which is E minor 7 in root position. That's a 4-7 chord, kind of an interesting chord here with a passing tone in the alto. F sharp, A sharp, E, and C sharp is 5-7, F sharp 7 in root position, and then an anticipation before we get B minor in root position. So yeah, very interesting phrase. We're going to go into the last phrase, which is pretty normal. We have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A, and this B minor chord, I think, is our gateway back to the key of A minor. We do start things off with an F sharp minor chord, F sharp, A, F sharp, and C sharp, which is our 6th chord, another transitive progression, passing 7th on the bass. Then we have D, A, E, and C sharp. It's kind of an interesting chord. There's counterpoint going on here, so we got to be a little bit liberal in terms of our labeling of this chord. I think that we could look at this as a D major 7 chord, so 4-7, but based on this pattern that I see here in the bass, I do think this D and this, I do think this D is an accented non-chord tone, and actually the aggregate of everything that's going on here, including this F sharp, which is also a passing tone. I think this is actually just taking the 6th chord and inverting it, putting it in second inversion. This is a pattern that we see in Bach from time to time, where the inner voices become non-chord, or sorry, not the inner voices, the inner 8th notes become non-chord tones, and the 6th chord turns into a 6-6-4 chord. But the difference between 4-7 and 6 is very slight. They share most of their tones in common, so I think as far as their function and whatever you choose to label this is concerned, they're basically the same thing. It's just the texture makes it difficult to decide one or the other. We then have B, B, G sharp, and D. That's 7, 6, and 4 typically goes to 7, but 6 can equally go to 7 as well. There's nothing barring either of them from going to 7, so I'd say we see 4 go to 7 more, which might strengthen this analysis, but that's probably why the tones are here in the texture in the first place. Either way, I don't really think it makes too much of a difference how you analyze it. This is just how I'm choosing to analyze it, though. After our 7-6 chord, we have A major, C sharp, E, A, and C sharp, which is 1-6. We then have a D as a passing tone and B as an anticipation in the melody, and then we get E, E, A, and B. One of these 5/4 suspensions where we have an enclosure in between, or enclosure around the resolution here. And similar to our second phrase cadence, we have 5 going to 5-7 here, where the resolution happens and we get the 7th introduced at the same time. The C sharp's a non-chord tone. and then we cadence on 1 A major, A, E, E, sorry, A, C sharp, E, and I always get my clefs confused. I'm not the best reader. But that being said, that's going to be today's video. Man, my throat is so sore, so I'm going to keep the outro short for today's particular video. If you're interested in following me along on this journey to analyze all of the chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Feel free to hit the notification icon. I'd love to have you along on the journey, and you'll get notified of when my daily upload goes live. I'm really excited to have seen the community grow as far as it has so far, and I'm only excited for, or I'm not only excited for that, but I'm excited to see it grow larger in the coming weeks and months. But with all that being said, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.